Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome here to the Wine with Jimmy channel. This is all about the wonderful world of wine. I go through a specific topic or a region or a country or whatever it may be and talk about the beautiful wine that comes from that area. Here is a video of no exception. We are talking about New Zealand's Sauvignon Blanc. Now, my videos follow key text and key syllabus of major qualifications. So if you are studying the world of wine, you will find these videos very, very useful. So this is a part of my series 1 on the introduction to New Zealand. And we are here looking at, by far, the most important grape variety, Sauvignon Blanc of New Zealand. No doubt you have tasted the very aromatic expressions of New Zealand's Sauvignon Blanc. If you have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. And you can do so by commenting on this video below. Maybe you try Sauvignon Blanc frequently, you have some recommends, or maybe you have been to New Zealand to taste some very sort of hidden gems. Please do get in touch. Make sure you click like and subscribe as well. So why look at Sauvignon Blanc first? Sauvignon Blanc dominates plantings in New Zealand. It accounts for 65% of the vineyard area in 2023. Actually, much more in production, somewhere around 75% of production. So it's by far the leading variety and one that we must talk a lot about. You'll see it from that table there. I will not be talking about any other variety here. That's covered in other videos. So I'm going to go through the first section here talking about a typical Sauvignon Blanc and how it's made in the vineyard. And the second section will be typical Sauvignon Blanc in the winery. Okay, so let's have a look first of all at Sauvignon Blanc in the vineyard. So the high light levels, adequate water with irrigation as required, and careful canopy management will ensure good ripe fruit with Sauvignon Blanc. So the UV light will ensure the aromatics are typically more tropical. I've mentioned this in a previous video. We have something around in Marlborough, for example, 2,400 to 2,500 hours of sunlight per year, which is hundreds more than, say, the Loire Valley, where you find Sauvignon Blanc in France. That extra bit of sunlight, that more UV light, means that you get more ripeness, typically sort of leading towards tropical passion fruit, for example. The type of vine training system can also have an impact, as I have talked about in previous videos. Without adequate knowledge on this, there would be excessive vegetative growth, leading to far too much shading of the fruit and potentially a reduction in both yield and quality. So that increased shading can lead to less ripe fruit with increased amounts of methoxypyrazine. Now, this is the compound that you will find in the likes of things like green pepper, for example, asparagus. So these are characteristics you will find in Sauvignon Blanc if they have gone through these conditions. So you will find that it can be a possibility, of course. Now, the high diurnal range within some parts of New Zealand means that a long growing season producing fruit with intense aromas and also high acidity. Now, acidity is essential to Sauvignon Blanc to deliver the fresh fruit character to work with that real sort of riper character that one can find in New Zealand. So protecting that acidity is very key. The diurnal range, by the way, is the difference between the night and day, and there's a high difference in places like Central Otago, for example. Very importantly, row orientation. So row orientation, our direction of our rows in our vineyard, so north to south or east to west, for example, and also careful canopy management can actually be a way of managing the type of aromas that we desire. So fully ripe fruit with tropical notes will often be on the sunny side of the canopy. It sounds like an old song. And that's what I've got here. You'll see the sun is shining from the right-hand side of our screen. And you'll see the sunny side, riper fruit with more tropical aromas, like passion fruit, for example. You'll get sort of green pepper and more grassy characteristics on the more shadier side of the canopy. So this means things like the green pepper, the methoxypyrazine that we mentioned earlier. Now, of course, the earth moves around the sun moves through our sky, and there will be somewhat of a balance between this. But of course, it very much depends on the direction or the direction of the slope as well, the strength of the morning sun versus the strength of the afternoon sun. And do the grapes hang more on the sunnier side or the shaded side? What kind of management of the canopy are we introducing? Also, we can talk about earlier picking. So, when the grapes are not completely ripe, a producer can choose to pick a little bit on the underripe side. So, that will increase the potential methoxypyrazine because in vines, there are more methoxypyrazine when the vine is ripening and not fully ripe. As it becomes fully ripe, these levels decrease. So, if you pick earlier, you will have high levels of these, like the green pepper that we mentioned here. And I've got an arrow to identify that for you here. Also, machine harvesting. So, machine harvesting can create some skin contact with the juice because some of the berries will be crushed. And this, in transportation, means that you can get higher levels of herbaceous characteristics again through that contact with the skin, certainly if they are picked a little bit earlier again. Okay, so that's talking about typical Sauvignon Blanc in the vineyard. Now we're going to talk about options for producing a typical Sauvignon Blanc in the winery. Okay, so we're now, grapes are being transported to the winery. Now, one thing to note immediately is that some producers may have to chaptalize at the beginning of fermentation. And that's if it's particularly been quite a cool year, or maybe they've harvested a little bit too early, potentially. Now, often in Sauvignon Blanc production, there is a reduction of contact with oxygen. We do not want the grape and the grape juice to come in too much contact with oxygen. So we often refrigerate the grapes on arrival and use certain types of gases when they are pressed and then go through fermentation. Things like carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and more typically today, argon gas, as it's said to be much more protective due to the fact it's very, very heavy in comparison to air. Next up, and something which is very much widely discussed in the wine industry, is the impact of the selection of yeast that is utilized for the fermentation. So, what may be added? Now, some producers may have natural ferments, of course, but many that are making much more commercial wine will utilize cultured and selected yeast. So you can purchase certain types of yeast that will give you more passion fruit or grapefruit characteristics. There are others that protect more of the herbaceous side of things. So it's very much dependent on what you want out of it. Typically, there needs to be a balance of what you're going to get from your fermentation through fruit and what is there as methoxypyrazine from the vineyard. So a balance between the fruit and the kind of herbaceous characteristic. Now, low fermentation temperatures in stainless steel vessels are typical to retain primary characteristics. There are the fermentation room in Babich Winery in Marlborough, typical fare. The avoidance of malolactic conversion, and that's to preserve high acidities and to retain primary fruit characteristics. And also then avoiding lees aging. And remember this, I'm talking for typical Sauvignon Blanc here, not the alternative examples. So lees aging, very little amounts for a couple of months in stainless steel vessels, once again to retain the primary characteristics. Our final slide is what may be utilized throughout the process of processing Sauvignon Blanc, and that is the use of sulfur dioxide and even ascorbic acid as well. So this is typically done throughout the process, but most famously, as you can see there on your picture, most famously is done just before bottling, so you can have a final protective element in the wine as it goes to market. And then they're bottled under screw cap, which keeps them even fresher. So sulfur is typically mixed into water and diluted into water, and then that will be added to wine. This goes into the wine. Some of it will bind with the molecules of the wine. Some of it will remain as free sulfur, protecting it against any kind of oxidation. Ascorbic acid is also a preservative that can be used as well. Now, I've just really talked about the Sauvignon Blanc, which is the example of a typical style. But you might find Sauvignon Blanc being put through barrel fermentation, lees stirring, some malolactic and oak maturation, or being blended. So there are more and more going through different processes to make more complex expressions, sort of akin to what you'd find in places like Grave and Pessac-Léognan in Bordeaux, for example. Okay, well, that brings me to a conclusion for the key grape variety Sauvignon Blanc, talking about the typicity of that style, both through the vineyard and winery. If you do have any comments or questions, please do get in touch. You can do that by commenting on this video below. Otherwise, please join me for part 6. Now, part 6, along with the earlier parts of this series, parts 1 through to 3, are only available on my e-learning platform. You can find information about that at www.winewithjimmy.com or go straight to e-learning.com for Wine with Jimmy, and you will find the information you need. Otherwise, it's for me to say goodbye. If you do come to the UK, please do come and say hello for a glass or bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Goodbye.